technical difficulties we've had that we've just went through. My name is Sotonwa. I'm a TDI board member at large. I'm honored to be a distinguished moderator today. So thank you all for joining us. Before we start, there are a few housekeeping rules to help us facilitate communication today in this beautiful, wonderful discussion we're going to have. We do have captioning. Many of us know I'm Black. I'm wearing a suit, a gray suit with a blue tie and a white button-up shirt. I am bald. So now I'll turn it over to our wonderful panelists that we have today to introduce themselves and share with us a little bit of background about who you are and tell us why you were chosen for this panel. So I'll start with Karen or Christian. Hi, my name is Christian. I'm a white male. I have brown hair with a little gray that's poking through just now. And I'm wearing a black shirt. And I have a blue background. So thank you. Let's turn it over to Karen.
Hi, I'm going to use the interpreter because we have limited time, okay? I'm Karen Peltz Strauss. And I'm a white female with short brown hair, which was long last week because I had let it grow throughout COVID and am now donating it. I am wearing a multicolored dress and I have some silver jewelry on. And I guess I'm middle-aged or maybe older than that, but young at heart. Sending it over to Larry.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Larry Walke. It's pronounced like you walk down the street. I'm a white male, black hair, mid-50s. I have a bright blue button-down shirt on and a little bit of gray also, like Christian, and looking forward to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry, Christian, and Karen. Really, thank you so much for being here with us. Your expertise, your resources, your knowledge that you bring to this discussion around captioning is great. 30 years ago, we would have never thought that deaf people would have equal access at every level. But with the ADA, we are able to challenge the status quo, which means we can demand change and actually change and benefit people who have hearing loss in the deaf community. And that also leads to the passage of another law, the 21st Century Communication and Video Accessibility Act in 2010. That law requires captioning at every level. So we really want to hone in on and talk about television. It's already come so far with new technologies coming into play. We're trying to see the potential impact that those changes that we've seen throughout time. in some areas that we might need to roll up our sleeves and keep doing that hard work to improve the requirements for accessibility. So that's where I want to have this discussion today. The audience, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature. And as you talk, and as we're talking as a panel, please use the Q&A feature, and we will keep an eye on that and make sure that we bring your thoughts and your questions into this discussion. I'm curious, panelists, from your experience, since you've seen all of the shifts and the change in technology in the world that we have today, including captioning on TV, what do you think, what's your perspective on what's going on in the landscape today? I think Christian was going to start. I see he was ready to jump in and start that. So go ahead. Christian here. I have a lot to say here. I'm very grateful for Larry explaining what's going on and how the internet has actually impacted cable. I know that has helped, that sort of frames my argument. Do you mind, Larry, speaking on that first? This is Opie.
I guess I'm trying to assume what you're asking is captioning on television as opposed to captioning on internet video programming. Is that what you're asking?
This is Opie. Yes, it's a little different. The 21st century focus more on internet, right? And for TV, now we're assuming that cable has already developed their technologies. That's in play already, right? And we feel that's in the right place. It's not perfect, but it's perfectly accurate or accessible. But now that we're transitioning to an online time, as it's cheaper and more accessible, where you can access cable at home and like streaming services and anywhere you go, really. Even though the online world doesn't seem to have the captioning down quite right. So with the use of artificial intelligence, AI, ASR, and things like that, it's becoming an issue. And there have been some experts in industries in the field that feel like it's good enough. And there are some deaf and hard of hearing people, community members who feel it's not quite there. It's not enough to meet the needs or accommodate people who are deaf or hard of hearing. And there's some issues still with, inaccurate captioning, dealing with accents, not being able to accurately portray that message. So as a TDI board member, often we talk about TV craptioning, meaning it's no good. So we're labeling it craption. So we're like, oh gosh, this captioning doesn't work. So what are your thoughts in regards to that? And what you're seeing as we transition from, cable to technology. Right. AI, how wonderful it is, but at the same time, we need to have a standard policy in regards to this. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, first I should make clear I'm not a technologist or a technical person by any stretch of the imagination. And that I work for the National Association of Broadcasters. So to the extent I have any familiarity with the rules and obligations for captioning, they have to do with your traditional over-the-air television stations and what rules and policies apply to them. My supposition is that there's probably a much more wide variety in the quality and even the availability of captions on online video, because there are no FCC policies or rules requiring a lot of that video programming to be captioned. Now, if there's a video program or a video clip that's been shown on over-the-air television first, and then subsequently shown online, such as on a TV station's website or their app, or perhaps some other online outlet that they have a relationship or arrangement with, well, then that programming must be captioned with the same quality as it was when it was shown on television. But of course, there's just, an unlimited tons and tons of video programming and clips that are just online and have never been shown on television before. And, the question of the FCC, the question of whether those clips and videos have to be captioned, at least under the FCC's rules or policies, so far that's an open question about whether the FCC has the legal authority to require Facebook, Netflix, and the millions of other internet websites require them to caption their content or not. I'm not really smart enough to opine on whether or not the FCC has legal authority to require that. I know TDI has strong views on that. National Association of Broadcasters, or NAB, where I work, we haven't taken a position on that. It's a fairly thorny issue because it brings in the larger issue of whether the FCC, what kind of authority they have over internet or online content. And for better or worse, that's not something that NAB right now has had to concern itself with. So my guess is that everything you say about, the range of quality of captions online from good to bad, I'm sure it's correct. And perhaps, more government intervention or something needs to be done there. But I can't comment on, why some online outlets have better captioning, and probably a lot of them have captions, like you said.
I can jump in if you like. So as you know, I've been involved in these issues, probably for around 4 decades. I used to work at the National Center for Law and the Deaf, later named Deafness, at Gallaudet University, later at the National Association of the Deaf, and then did 2 tours of duty as Deputy Chief of the FCC's Consumer Governmental Affairs Bureau. And in these various capacities, I helped write the laws and regulations governing captions. When we first started drafting the CVAA, the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, we saw what was happening in terms of video programming. We went to Congress and asked for that law to cover all kinds of video programming, including online video programming. But that was back in 2007. The law got passed, as you mentioned, Opie, in 2010. And it just wasn't ready for prime time for Congress to require captioning on just about everything that looked at or resembled television captions. And so all that we were able to get at that time was that if it's been shown on television and then it is delivered via internet protocol, it has to be captioned. And as Larry mentioned, the quality rules that the FCC adopted while I was there in 2014 also go with that transition over to internet protocol. But there are huge gaps. And The TDI and many other disability consumer organizations, including some research institutes such as the one that Christian works at, have asked the FCC to take further action to address the virtual explosion of online video distributors. Kudos goes to the National Association of the Deaf, who were successful in getting a settlement after a lawsuit against Netflix many years ago, which prompted Netflix to caption nearly all of its programming. That was a real turning point, after which Amazon followed suit, and Hulu has done a fairly good job now as well, although they were third in line. And some of the other more major streaming services are just automatically captioning, understanding how mainstream this accessibility service is. But this has gone way beyond even those more mainstream types of streaming services. There are now studio-specific services as well, such as Disney Plus and Showtime and Peacock and Apple TV. And there are live TV-focused services such as Sling TV and YouTube TV, and specialized offerings such as Acorn and BritBox and ESPN. And I don't mean to call out any of these, but the list just goes on, as well as the ability to watch video on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. It's truly overwhelming. And this doesn't even get at the devices that people use or the operating systems that people use. So we all know that when we log on to one device with one operating system, with one streaming service, we're going to have a very different captioning experience than if we log on to another. The captions may or may not be there. It may not even be because they weren't provided. It may just be that we don't know how to access them. So it's overwhelming, the changes that have occurred. And when we wrote the CVAA, we really tried to make it future-proof, and it was next to impossible. So there is an opportunity to go back, not only to the FCC and have it exercise its authority to the maximum extent possible, and close some of the original categorical exemptions that still exist. For example, there's not even a requirement right now for commercials to be captioned. I saw that on the chat. We tried to get that back in 1996. We were not successful. There's not a requirement for new networks to provide captioning until they're 4 years into their business, which is fortunately not an exemption that's used all that often. Most networks start from the beginning, but it's there. They can actually skip the first 4 years. There's a lot that the FCC needs to do to rectify some of the problems that are within its jurisdiction, like the categorical exemptions. And then I think there are some things that Congress is going to have to attend to.
So Larry and Karen, thank you. Before Christian jumps in here, I would like to take a moment to say something. TDI does have a focus on the interests of the consumers. And based on what Karen and Larry just shared with us, it seems that the industry experts, those who had defied ASR, and we need to get to the point where they're feeling like they're meeting the needs for the closed captions. But as the community, we're feeling like not enough has been done. So wondering what you think about potential opportunities for us as consumers, as customers, to gain the data that we need to use based on our experience and the shared experience from using these captions, specifically on the TV with ASR, and then maybe informing the FCC and trying to strategize kind of with you. Can we have that discussion? Christian here saying, okay, so first of all, I want to mention HLAA, the Hearing Loss Association of America, had put out a survey 2 years ago, and they did ask a consumer experience of captions. So we are analyzing that survey, and there's a lot of negative comments in that survey. It's quite shocking, and we have filed that analysis with the FCC. So that's talking about captions in general, not focusing on ASR only, but in general. So wanted to mention that because often it's very hard for consumers' perspective to be in there and which type of caption and method they're using to receive the services. So just want to clarify that it's not specifically in there. Yeah, it's not clear which we're talking about. So it's just not clear because we do have that variety. And that is one reason why sometimes it's hard to identify exactly the ASR. You know, if they're on TV, that's an old system, very old. That like first, those standards of captions are 40 years old. They're over 40, those standards. And even though the digital TV has come about, those are 20 years old. So it's everything is very old. So that means then that a lot of the issues that are showing up with captions are old, and it's on with that. But we need to talk about internet and broadcasting and the pipeline there, about how we're sharing and getting this and what opportunities might be for mistakes to show up. So it does cause a lot of issues, and sometimes it can look, what it looks like may not be we may be placing blame on the wrong person. We place it on the captioner, and oftentimes it's on the technology. So we have to confirm exactly where the problem is, if it's ASR, and then what technology we're using. Ope here. So Christian, how do we then identify who is using ASR and who is using just the standard captions? Christian here. If you can, you ask. You ask the participant, you ask the human, what are you using? Are you using ASR? So you would ask them. So you'd have to ask the broadcaster. And then sometimes you can ask the type of error. You know, it can look like it's from the ASR. So if we, as an example, maybe they try to clarify, but they're wrong. And so we can blame the ASR, but also, so there's the electrical technical part, the ENT, the electric, so yeah, it's newsroom, the electric newsroom. Yeah. And so sometimes we're getting some errors from that space as well. So yeah, it does depend. So I'm going to give it over to you now, Larry. Ope here. My question is, how could we, who do we hold responsible then for these sorts of errors, and how do we get a hold of the right person, and so we can make the policy change that is necessary? Larry, I saw your hand go up. Did you want to make a comment here?
Yeah, well, Christian is right, of course, that the best way to find out what kind of captioning is being used is to ask the broadcaster. I did ask before the panel, I did talk to a few owners of TV stations and TV station groups. And some of them are using ASR here and there. Some are using it, not using it, but have it run in the background while they're using live captioners. Some informed me that during COVID, when there were lots and lots of live public events like governor's press conferences and things like that, they had a lot of problems often finding a live captioner. And during those circumstances, they used ASR. Then there's one station mentioned that they're using ASR, but during the exempt hours, early in the morning. And this is not statistical, it's only anecdotal, but all of these stations and companies that are trying it here and there report no change in the number of concerns or questions or complaints that they receive from consumers. And some of them express surprise at that because a lot more people are at home watching television. They also mentioned, like Christian said, that some people can tell because I guess ASR just rolls a little differently on screen than a human captioner. But some of these stations, some of these people mentioned that, at least from their point of view, and when ASR is trained properly and cautiously and extensively so that it can learn the lexicon and the dictionary, and a station is subscribing to the service that feeds in new names and things like that. And you know, when it's used cautiously and properly and trained enough, it works very well. And in certain respects, their anecdotal observations, it's better than live captioners in certain respects, in terms of completeness, catching every single word. Someone else mentioned something very interesting to me, which I didn't know, which was that there's when you use ASR, there is a specific reliable amount of latency between someone talking and the captions being produced. Let's say it's 1.5 seconds. When you use a live captioner, it can be anywhere from 1 second to 5 seconds if it's a really tough word or something. And they said because of that consistent period of latency, they can delay what goes out over the air and match up the speech with the captioning much closer and much more reliable and consistently. And that was something I really didn't know about until a few days ago. So kind of as consistent with what Larry Goldberg said on the previous panel, my impression, and again, this is, you know, third removed, is that ASR is making a lot of progress in the last couple of years, but maybe not ready for prime time. That's another discussion. But in certain respects, it seems to work very well, and consumers don't tell the difference, can't tell the difference, and it can, you know, it can be valuable when it's difficult to locate a live captioner on short notice. It can allow more content to be captioned. These are some of the anecdotes that I was informed about when I was asking some companies about their use or whether they've tried to use ASR. So.
Thank you so much, Larry. Karen, turning it over to you.
So I generally agree with Larry that there has been tremendous strides made in ASR, and it can work really well for pre-recorded programming where somebody can check the accuracy of what is provided, and it could save time in that way. But I'm still worried about it for live programming for a number of reasons. And many of them were enumerated by Larry. Where you have people who have varied accents, where you have specialized vocabulary, where you have proper names, where you have overlapping speakers, where you have background noise or background information. As you know, sometimes when we watch television, it'll indicate whether somebody's whispering or screaming. It's not, ASR isn't going to do that. It's great in emergencies. It can be good in emergencies. Then again, it can be also detrimental if it's not accurate. And there are studies, unfortunately, that raise concerns about the error rates of ASR when used by persons of varied dialects and races. And the FCC's Commissioner Jeffrey Starks, for example, pointed out a study by Stanford University in 2020 that showed error rates that were almost twice as high for people who were African American as they were for people who were white, even when each of the speakers spoke the same words and were of the same age and gender. And there was another study by the National Academy of Sciences, again, that revealed large racial disparities, again, because of variations in speech caused by regional dialects. So these are challenging for ASR systems. Again, I don't want to be a naysayer. I think that tremendous strides have been made, but we have to really be careful, because if misinformation is provided, especially in news, live news, that can be really harmful to the people watching those programs. The other thing that I want to mention is that, for better or worse, I think for those of us stuck at home, for worse, a lot of us are working from home. And so, for example, Relay Services has moved almost entirely to the home environment. So while it may have been a need to use ASL when captioners could not be found at the beginning of the pandemic, the fact is that people can work from their homes. They can provide captioning from home. My son provides audio description from home, not only doing the writing of audio description, but the voiceovers from his house. And the equipment was not expensive to purchase and very easy to provide. The other thing I want to comment on with respect to what Larry said are complaints. Unfortunately, when I was at the FCC, we noticed that we did not get a lot of complaints on these issues either. Although I will say that before the captioning, there have been periods where complaints have come in, but it's the lack of complaints is not a good indicator for the lack of quality. And one of the real reasons for this is that people who are
I wanted to say that. I was going to say that, Karen.
Yeah, do not know what they can't hear. So if the captions are bad, it's really hard to tell that the captions are bad. That's the first reason. The second reason is that people just don't know how to complain. I mean, as much as when I was at the FCC, we would try to inform people on how to do it, not everybody is connected to a national organization, for example. And then the third reason is that people are busy, especially during this pandemic. Things have been turned upside down. While many of us stayed home, all of us stayed home, many of us had children to educate, grandchildren to babysit. We didn't have a second to ourselves. It wasn't like we had leisure time. So there are lots of reasons that people don't complain. And so it's really not a good indicator for the accuracy of ASR.
Correct. Yes, thank you so much, Karen. Before we jump to you, Christian, I would like to say, very interesting to read the research that's on this. There has been some evidence that hearing kids who watch TV with captions on are actually learning better and are becoming smarter. And so, a little bit concerning when we use ASR that the captions may have these errors, because the kids are able to, correct that. And so deaf and hard of hearing children are not able to make those corrections. It impacts the people who are learning as well. So that's one of the reasons we're feeling like consumer perspective here is critical and key to making this change successful. So I will go into Christian now. Yes, the Christian here. First, I am a strong advocate of what Karen has said here. Our research does verify all of that the errors in captioning, that deaf people don't know their actual errors because they can't hear the input. If you're reading the caption transcript and compare it to what actually is being given audio wise, it is shockingly bad. The captions look good, they're understandable, but you can see a lot of things are missing when you compare the two. It's quite amazing. So there is a big difference having a human captioner who is able to figure out how to pull that information and condense it down to make it an easy to read thing. So we need to think about that. ASR cannot accomplish that. So human and ASR both have missing information. I will say that. So it's in different ways. So talking about how then to make like who to hold responsible, right? Larry G. Goldberg did mention in his presentation about captioning metrics. And so we do need to set up and have some sort of metrics. It is very complex because the metrics need to be neutral and they have to apply to both the human and ASR captions. It's not a simple thing to show. It's not a simple thing. Human errors, ASR errors are very different. And we haven't seen any metric that can capture both of those in the right way. Some of the metrics do apply very well for ASR. Other metrics apply specifically for the human captioners. How to combine those and bridge them together needs more research. Ope here. Thank you so much, Christian. Wonderful food for thought here, and I agree with you. So wanted to add to this conversation that the metrics need to include the consumer live experience, the consumer lived experience, not just a metrics that are given by industry experts who are making decisions for people. Next question to you all. This morning I was watching the Olympics on television and I noticed the captions sometimes were being covered or were covering like information that was on the screen, who is on there, what country they're from. So that I felt like I needed some flexibility about where the captions might live on my screen. I really wanted that feature. I wanted that flexibility. At this point, I don't have that. They're in one place. Do you guys have thoughts on if we should push for that feature and that standardization of allowing the human user to have the flexibility of moving the captions on the screen, not to where some industry has set up for us, but that they, on the top or the bottom, and someone else has decided, but because in the end, there has been created some barriers. I'm not able to see some of the information on what I'm watching. Any thoughts about that, guys? Open for discussion.
So when the FCC issued its quality rules in 2014, it looked at 4 different categories of quality: accuracy, synchronicity, making sure that the captions are synchronous with their corresponding dialogue; program completeness, making sure that the captions run from the beginning to the end of the programming; and placement. And actually, there's a rule in place that says that captions are not supposed to cover up other important on-screen information, such as character faces, featured text, graphics, or other information essential to understanding or accessing a program's content. However, as you saw today, and as I see all the time, this is not always followed. And one of the reasons is that there is so much material on the screen at this point that it's hard, I've been told it's hard to find a place for the captions where it's not going to cover up something. When in 19, I'm not sure, 20, I'm not sure of the year, when the FCC adopted captioning display standards, I think it was in the early 2000s. Yes, it was around 2000. It required the ability to control display of captions in a lot of different ways: the font, the size, the color, the background, etc. But it didn't require the ability for consumers to be able to move the placement because technologically it was not feasible. I think that I'm going to hand it over to Christian at this point, because I think that may be changing with online captioning. For example, with Zoom, you can move it around and I love it. I love to be able to move it around. So, and my television right now is basically a web device. It actually talks to me. To my dismay, it has sent us messages while we're watching it. It's a brand new device and apparently knows who we are. I have to change the privacy settings to get that to stop, but I think that it's going to be possible. And I would love, for one, to be able to control the placement. So handing it over to Christian to hopefully tell us that we will be able to do this in the future.
Yes, Christian speaking. Definitely, I'm in agreement with you. The technology does exist now. We can move the captions wherever we want. We do have that technology. And I also agree with Ope there. Users would definitely benefit from being able to move the captions up and down, and it should be possible. It would be a very valuable option. So I would say part of the issue is with television. That is still old technology. Again, I'll say it again, the technology is old. What what the digital technology that we have there is very old. So I would say we have to have that. I'm in agreement that the technology, the TV manufacturing and technology people have to get together to improve the technology that is in there and the standards that they have, because it's 20 years old. We need to get that replaced with something new. And it does take time. It doesn't happen in overnight. But what we have now on the TV manufacturers, what we have now can provide the option to move that. The technology is there. And I think I might be wrong, but I think that maybe LG does have that option. Don't quote me on that though. Ope here. Yeah, sorry. I'm trying to remember which one it was, says Christian. Ope says, thank you. It's good to know that that technology is there. And now the question is, how do we convince those TV manufacturers to actually adopt the technology and allow us the flexibility and the freedom that we need to have those adjustments made? So should we, write new policy or get the FCC to write new policy to guide them and to lead them? I think that's something that we definitely need to have some thinking sessions about, because I know some of you are very involved at the policy level. And so hopefully you'll have that on your mind as this conversation starts today and continues on. We only have a couple of minutes left. I'm looking that there's a couple of questions in the Q&A box. So let me take a look at that. So one of the questions to ask is why, when I'm watching TV and the captions are just terrible, but if I'm watching something on a different station, if it's far away, they're so much better. What's the difference? Do we have some thoughts on that? Sorry, this is Christian here. Yes, Christian. Sorry, I was trying to type my answer in the reply box, but here I am. Okay, Christian here. There are two reasons why this might be. The first one will be that it might be the errors are coming through the actual broadcasting from the station. So the broadcaster then sends that and then it has to broadcast out. And there's a lot of steps that it gets before it gets to your TV, and then the TV has to interpret all of that. So there's a lot of steps there. Second, it might be that if you have two different broadcasters and they're showing the same video, but they might be hiring different captioners for that video. Ope here, thank you so much. I would add that it also might be that the person who is watching might be watching on cable, as opposed to the person who is watching maybe on an internet streaming service. Might be another reason why there's a disparity moving on to another question. Just give me a second here while I read it. Okay. Question here is, we have talked about it and maybe answered it, but simple question. How do we get telecommunications or TV captions standardized? Anybody want to answer this? Karen, please.
So, well, the NAB actually has been really helpful for many, many years on captioning. And it's because of much of the work that they did that enabled us to work with the FCC and say, look at all the captioning that's available. I'm talking about back in the 1990s and 1980s, to help push things over the edge and to get Congress to require captions. But industry has just gone so far. And my experience in advocacy is that while working with industry is really important and collaboration is really important, again, with the National Association of Broadcasters, it was very successful on many levels. At some level, you need to go to the policymakers again. And again, there has been just a revolutionary list of changes in this industry over the last decade that the FCC needs to attend to. So I think that there's just truly a laundry list of issues that have been presented to the FCC in comments. The FCC has an open proceeding on accessibility issues, and TDI is one of the leading organizations that submitted comments in that proceeding. And I think it's incumbent upon the FCC to take as much of its authority as it can to move forward, including on making new standards. And whatever the FCC cannot do, Congress needs to do. And some of us are already talking to Congress. So I don't think I'm revealing anything. I hope to, I don't know whether we're going to do another effort like the Coalition of Accessible Organizations, but we're going to try to update the laws. They constantly need updating. And I'm afraid that unless they're not updated, the laws and regulations, those standards may not occur.
I would just add that, Karen's on the right track there. Most people watch television now. They don't know if they're watching a broadcaster, or a cable programming channel or something else. And when the FCC has authority over certain video outlets and not others, and the other folks are doing it voluntarily, there's just going to be a wide variety. The broadcasters who are regulated, they do everything they can to produce good quality captions. It's good business, competitive reasons. They want to reach as wide an audience as possible. They don't have any interest in cutting anybody out, especially these days with so much competition. But yeah, if you're watching TV and you don't know what you're watching, it could be something that is just needs some more policies to rule it.
Ope here. Thank you so much, Larry. Thank you, Karen. And I want to say thank you, Christian, as well. I really want to continue this conversation. This has been a wonderful experience. Our time, however, is up. So I want to say thank you to each participant and each member of our panel. We all learned something. And what I would like you to bring home is everything we've talked about here. Do continue these conversations and spread the word about the need for change and for the needs of this community. Thank you so much. Thank you to our supporters, TDI. We really couldn't do this without you. We couldn't continue this work. And also, we're using this opportunity to reset all of this. And so